it's just a major, major setback, and will delay a treatment that I think we can confidently right now with the existing data say is safe and effective under the right conditions. It will prevent that treatment from becoming available to the millions of people that are suffering with PTSD right now and not responding adequately to existing treatments. And we're talking about, thousands of suicides a year that could potentially be prevented with better treatments, because that's how many people are committing suicide every year with a PTSD diagnosis. And that's the biggest tragedy around this.
This is Crisis Point. Heading into 2024, a renewed sense of hope was palpable for the psychiatric community and people with post-traumatic stress disorder, better known as PTSD. A world where patients could have access to psychedelic medicine to help combat PTSD was nearly within arm's reach. That came crashing to a halt when the FDA chose not to approve MDMA capsules for the treatment of PTSD, a move announced by Lykos Therapeutics on August 11, 2024. According to experts, the paradigm shift could have ushered in a new age for PTSD treatment options. Based on estimates from the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention, only 30% of patients on current PTSD treatments fully recover. 40% of patients improve on treatment, but still experience mild to moderate symptoms. As it stands, there are no FDA-approved medications on the market specifically designed to treat PTSD. Clinicians resort to prescribing antidepressants such as SSRIs and SNRIs or anti-anxiety medications to manage their patients' symptoms. With the FDA now requesting an additional trial and the future of MDMA-assisted therapy, as well as psychedelic medicines and psychiatric care, it is uncertain, especially in light of the concerns levied during a June advisory board meeting. Will this discourage future exploration of this frontier? When will patients see the relief they're seeking? What happens next for the field? Traditional treatments like SSRIs and therapy have helped some, but many continue to suffer in silence. Christina Pierce was one of those individuals. After years of struggling with the debilitating effects of PTSD, she began searching for alternative therapies that might offer hope where others had failed her. Her journey led her to an innovative and controversial treatment: MDMA-assisted therapy.
What motivated me to participate in the trial was experiencing decades of a lack of success with other therapies to treat my PTSD. I did not realize that I had PTSD until my 40s, my mid-40s, and I was absolutely confounded when I was prescribed the exact same medications as when I had been diagnosed previously with depression and anxiety and so forth. So I started to research other alternative therapies, emergent therapies, and found this one, and had looked into ketamine as well, but felt that this was a better one for me because of my circumstances, and so I then applied for the trial. I am so disappointed because it's clear to me that this is something that can absolutely address complex trauma and trauma in general in a way that any existing medications can't touch. And as a matter of fact, I feel like a lot of the SSRIs are actually dangerous. My experience was certainly that. I became suicidal when I took an SSRI, and other therapies actually brought me sort of closer to the edge, if you will. I liken the MDMA to, having the neurological repair that has to happen first before you can address trauma, the psychological and mental and cognitive aspects of it. So to me, this was such a massive disappointment because the amount of people that need this now who are in a life and death sort of equation, this is going to cost lives. And I think it is really important for us to keep in mind that this delay is denying people who are really, grappling with suicidality. This is a really impactful delay.
Pierce's story is not unique. Many experts in the field of PTSD treatment believe that MDMA-assisted therapy offers a groundbreaking approach that could fill gaps left by current treatments. However, the recent FDA decision has introduced new obstacles, delaying access to a therapy that could potentially save lives. Casey Paleo shares his insights into the challenges and setbacks faced by this promising treatment.
Without knowing what's in the complete response letter, which hasn't been made public, it's been issued to Lykos, but Lykos hasn't made the content of that letter known to us as the principal investigators in the phase 3 trials known in any detail, other than to say that it echoed the concerns raised by the AdCom panel back in June. It's hard to say without knowing the details of the complete response letter whether FDA's decision was justified. I will say that the requirement attached to the complete response letter, which I think took all of us by surprise, which was to recommend that or require that Lykos conduct another phase 3 clinical trial. I think that's pretty extreme and not support a decision not supported by the existing data, because I think the data that were generated in the first 2 phase 3 clinical trials were more than adequate to substantiate an approval.
Well, there is a path. It's a very challenging path for a startup company like Lykos, which, again, I don't know how much cash they have on hand, but certainly far less than is sufficient to do a new phase 3 trial. So they have to raise money, and that may be difficult in the face of the challenges they faced in the approval process. But they have to, raise probably like $100 million. So that's a barrier. Then that it has to be, the clinical trial has to be very different than the ones they've submitted. I mean, they can't admit people who have used MDMA before, and that was about 40% of the people. I think they probably can't use people who have been in psychotherapy. I think they have to find a psychotherapy that's accepted and not something ad hoc they created that has uncertainty among academic practitioners as to really whether the therapy is one that they have confidence in for PTSD, and use something that's more accepted, like prolonged exposure or cognitive processing therapy or something like that. So they'll have to use an accepted standard therapy. They'll have to use new sites and not involved with people who are, arguably passionate advocates of the treatment, and show more neutrality towards the outcome. So it would be a heavy lift, but there is a path, and it will take a long time, 2 or 3 years at least. What happened with MDMA really is not relevant to the current psychedelic drug development efforts. For a while now, the psychedelic companies like Cybin and Compass Pathways and others have moved away from representing their treatment as one that's just facilitating therapy, and are studying them as a treatment by itself. That the only quote unquote therapy is just the supporting guidance you get through the psychedelic experience, but not formal therapy, just preparation, experience, integration, but not 48 hours of therapy. So that will be different. The only issue that I think that came up and was not really discussed meaningfully at the AdCom that is relevant to the other psychedelics is the one I mentioned before, which is functional unblinding. You can't not know that you're on a psychedelic. But I think the FDA, in their opening remarks, made it quite clear that they're interested in thinking about what would be required to overcome that limitation in the so-called double-blind trials. And I think there are a number of elements, some of which Lykos did include that the FDA would find sufficient, like very high effect size, a plausible mechanism of action, a remote and blinded raters not involved in the study site, a large body of experience and use that's supportive of it, and so forth. There are a variety of criteria that could be used, I think, to mitigate the uncertainty that functional unblinding creates.
Despite these setbacks, there is still hope on the horizon for the approval of psychedelic-assisted therapy. The fight for PTSD treatments is far from over. While the road may be long and filled with challenges, the stories of people like Pierce give reason to believe that change is on the horizon. As the conversation around mental health continues to evolve, the hope is that one day soon, these groundbreaking therapies will be available to everyone who needs them, offering a new path to healing and recovery.
And I think ultimately, psychedelic-assisted treatments for PTSD will become approved. I think it's a question, again, still, I think it's a question of when and not if, because the existing treatments, as we've said, are really sort of inadequate to the burden of suffering related to PTSD. We just don't have really effective treatments right now. Very high dropout rates in the existing treatments, in large part because of the very thing that psychedelics, and particularly MDMA, can really help with, which is the ability to tolerate the type of prolonged exposure or cognitive reprocessing that is part and parcel of processing trauma and transmuting the phenomenology of a PTSD diagnosis in terms of the re-experiencing and the avoidance and all the attendant symptoms that go along with that. The psychological process, psychotherapeutic process that needs to happen to sort of transmute that suffering into what we call post-traumatic growth is very difficult to sustain for patients to withstand without the assistance of a really powerful therapeutic container, and in particular, what we've seen with the MDMA trials, a therapeutic container that is enhanced by the pharmacologic effects, the acute pharmacologic effects of MDMA. It really creates a whole new set of possibilities for people. They can do things under the influence of the medicine in the right therapeutic container that they simply can't do in an ordinary state of consciousness with regard to confronting traumatic memories and engaging in the psychological processes that would otherwise be too painful, that nonetheless need to be engaged with in order for healing to take place. So, we don't have other tools that I know of, that anyone knows of, that can do that. And without a tool like that, we're not going to have treatments for PTSD that are adequate to the need for effective treatments. So again, for that reason, I think it's a question of when.
This has been HCP Live Crisis Point. Thank you for watching.